let's go.
Okay. Right.
Mathin Vara, agus fáilte an hula duine. Good morning and welcome to you all. Welcome to this board meeting, our March board meeting. We have a very full agenda ahead of us today, morning and afternoon. Welcome also to any members of the public and the press who are accessing the meeting virtually today. And just to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded for future upload to our web, and to use the hands facility rather than the chat function at this meeting, please. Now, before we get into the meat of the meeting, so to speak, I want to say a few words of thanks to one of our members who will be departing the board after this meeting. She is Deirdre Mackay, whom we cannot unfortunately see at present on screen, but Deirdre will have her last formal public meeting with the board today. As you are aware, there are local government elections coming up at the beginning of May, and Deirdre has elected not to stand this time. Graham, who's also in the same situation of being representing a council, has the freedom to come back again if the electorate so wish. So this only refers to Deirdre at this stage. She's been our Highland Council board member since June of 2017 and has made a truly significant contribution to the board throughout her tenure. She was appointed a member of Highland Health and Social Care Committee early on in her term of office and was appointed vice chair in 2020. She served also on the Clinical Governance Committee until March of last year. She has chaired the Endowments Committee and Trustees since November of 2020. And she's also been the board's representative on the Sutherland Partnership, a local community partnership. She's had a particular interest in the work of the Organ and Tissue Donation Committee and has chaired that for a number of years. She did that with till 2020 when there was a change in the governance arrangements. So thank you, Deirdre. Thank you so much for your dedication, for your commitment, hard work, and for your friendship. And we wish you all the best for the future. I think Deirdre wants to say something.
Yeah, I'm sorry you can't see me. I can't get the light on the camera to work, but I would like to thank you for your very kind words, and just to say a few words. I joined the board, I think it's fair to say, at its most turbulent time, and it also coincided with a very turbulent time in Caithness when the population literally took to the streets. And when I reflect, that was only 5 years ago. In many ways, it seems like a lifetime, but in another respect, it's just been a flash. And to see and experience the difference in the board over these few years has been truly remarkable. It was a very difficult journey at the beginning, there's no question about that, but the change really has been remarkable, and credit to everybody who's involved. You know, when things are, you know, turbulent, it's difficult of everyone to give off their best. It's like trying to cross a very busy road with traffic coming at you from all directions. But when there's a calm about a board, it frees people up to give off their best. And NHS is going through an enormously difficult time and will do for many years to come. But it's always easier when there's a calm amongst the board. So I reflect on that period and the leadership that you've shown, Boyd, and the executive team and my fellow board members. You know, I've really appreciated the experience. I made reference to WIC, and I think of everything I've been involved in, I perhaps enjoyed, might not be the correct word, I think it was. As I said, people literally took to the streets, and it was an enormously difficult period, but so much learning took place over that time. And I was reflecting on the number of non-executives who've moved on and executives who've moved on. And it's so easy for learning to be lost as a result of that. And the one thing I think I would like to flag up was the value of bringing in an independent facilitator when there's an issue within a community. You know, communities, as we know, have a real ownership of their NHS facilities, and that's one message I would really like to convey, is the value of bringing in an independent facilitator. So my final is, it's a social comment. As a board, we've been meeting by teams, and it's become a way of life, and it's very good, and it works. But I think it's fair to say we all miss the social contact. And I reflect back on the session we had as a result of the Stirrick work, when we had those away days, and I think it was the only time we were together for a period as a board and had the opportunity to get to know each other out with board business. And the value of it, I feel, was immense, and indeed lifelong friends were made. And as I say, we're social creatures, and I think that kind of interaction again just helps us to function much more productively and constructively. So I know times are difficult, but if I had one little message, if you can possibly build in, come back together for development sessions or something, I think it would be very valuable. So on that note, I would like to thank everybody for their kindness and support, and not least, but I got to experience NHS firsthand through having COVID, and it was first class, there is no question. So for all of that, thank you very much, and good luck for the future.
Thank you very much, Deirdre, and you've just underlined how much we're going to miss you from the insights you have, from the experiences you've had, and the life of service you have given to the people of the Highlands, not just through NHS Highland, of course, but through your role as a councillor and many other forms of community activism as well. So, Deirdre, thank you again. Move on now to apologies, and ask Ruth to tell us of apologies.
Thank you, Boyd. Yep, I'm going to submit apologies for Philip McRae and for Fiona Davies. And Fiona Davies is substituted today by George Morrison. And unfortunately, Brian Williams from UHI won't be with us today. Thank you.
Okay. Just checking if, is Bert with us today? Yes, okay. Thanks. Conflicts of interest, any declarations of conflict of interest? Alistair.
Yeah, thank you, Boyd, and my apologies, colleagues. I will not be able to be here this afternoon. I've got an appointment as a consumer at Drakemore Hospital. So I considered making a declaration of interest in my capacity as a Highland councillor. However, examining the agenda and applying the objective test, I feel I don't need to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. We move on then now to the third item on the agenda, which is staff recognition. And today the focus is on microbiology, and we are being joined today by Dr. Susan McDonough, Mary Summerscales and Chris-Anne McBain. And I'm going to ask Susan to lead off and introduce this item. We're really pleased that you're able to join us for this session, which we as board members find invaluable. So over to you, Susan.
Thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you today. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yes.
What we're going to do is give a short presentation. Hopefully there won't be too much popping up. There was a meeting I couldn't get out of, so hopefully that won't be getting in the way. Yes, I'm a clinical scientist in microbiology, and Mary Summerscales runs the molecular section, which is responsible for most of the PCR testing. And also with us today is Chrisanne McBean, who is one of our trainees. Obviously, the staff have been invaluable through all of this, and it's fantastic that they are getting some recognition. Now, when I've done this before, there's sometimes been a delay to some of the slides coming up. Could you let me know if, in fact, it's not even moving? That's a good start. Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. The Microbiology Services, obviously, we cover such a huge area in Highland, and the microbiology department at Regmore also covers most of Argyll and Bute. So we take in Belford Hospital, Caithness General Hospital and Lornan Island Hospital labs. They do not offer any microbiology services. So what we've tried to do over the last few years is bring them on board, give them some equality of care, and try and put some rapid tests into those areas. The transport and logistics around these are huge, and we were working on this long before COVID. So I'll just start with a background of what was going on 2 years ago before we hit this pandemic, and we were offering a 6-day molecular testing service. So this provided testing for a range of infections, mainly for infection control purposes. So things like flu, other respiratory illnesses, noroviruses, and so on. This is only one section of the lab, and at that point it was quite small. We also operate a culture section which does bacteriology, and a serology section which offers mainly virology and immunology testing. And there's also a reference lab. So this was a small part of the lab. It's now become the biggest part of the lab since the pandemic. The tests that we were offering were batch-based, so it's a bit like running a washing machine. When you load your washing and you start it off, you can't load anything else until it's finished, when you can start again. So these tests were taking about anything between 4 to 6 hours, depending on the platform. This batch issue was a problem for us because we had to put a cutoff in place. So 11 o'clock was our cutoff, and as long as we received samples by then, we would promise to get a result out that day, as long as we had no problems with equipment or anything else. And those problems do occur. You can see then that if something arrives at noon, for example, we're not going to be able to get a test run till the next day. And if you've got transport time on top of that, it wasn't ideal for service provision, really. What we needed was something to provide rapid results for infection control and bed management use. Even then, it was becoming difficult to provide the service, and that was due to staffing issues. Trying to get trained staff is quite a problem in Highlands. I think we're not alone in that, and this is where people like Chrisanne are really important. They've really helped us get through the last few years. We had introduced point of care testing, or POC testing, for respiratory infections, initially when medical receiving was up on the 6th floor at Regmore, and now down on GC. And this has resulted in less ward closures for flu A. So this was already in place. With the pandemic, low numbers of samples were initially sent to Glasgow. We sent a courier every day. And this was because this test had to be set up very quickly. The main sites at that point were Edinburgh and Glasgow, and we have an association with Glasgow that they do a lot of support for us. We then worked to introduce systems locally, and this was initially on platforms that we already had, so that staff were used to, just processing samples and getting results out the other end. We quickly expanded to 7-day testing and extended days. So Monday to Friday, we were open 8 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, and with a normal working day at weekends. Now, this was done with the same amount of staff. We've managed to get a few locums in on times and a few extra support staff. But basically, the staff have been supporting this for the last 2 years. We developed 4 workflows, and this was with the Scottish Microbiology and Virology Network. This has been a fantastic organisation. They have, and that's the meeting that I'm usually in at this time of the day, we meet twice a week, and they've been absolutely important in getting these systems set up across the country, and that support for troubleshooting has really helped out. They have just won a Chief Scientist award for innovation, so it's really good that they've had the recognition for that. The workflows are based on demand and time. So if we get urgent samples in, we do a rapid test. Now, we can only run a few samples on these systems, which is why we have to limit it. But we can get results in anything from half an hour to an hour and a half with these systems. The other two are for medium and higher throughput. So when we get big batches in from the care homes, for example, they go on to these larger instruments, which take about 6 hours to get results out at the end. The testing has expanded from 10 to over 400 samples per day. And we've also put developments into the regional laboratories. Obviously, with the degree of specialism that's required for a lot of these systems, we've focused on the more point of care type analyzers. So for rapid and urgent tests, they do still send the vast majority of samples to us just because of capacity issues. The other interesting part is that the reference lab here, because the work for them quietened down quite a lot, were involved with SMVN in setting up antibody testing for the whole of the country. This has been used to, first of all, determine the prevalence of antibody in the population, and then look at the effect of vaccination, and also to inform when this was waning. So, for example, when to incorporate booster. The fallout from the pandemic is, I don't think we're any different from anywhere else in healthcare. The staff are absolutely exhausted, and we have depended on them so much that I think it's worth recognising that here. Our staffing levels have come up slightly, but it's still dependent on the initial trained staff that we had. We have had equipment issues. We've rushed in, like the rest of the country, an awful lot of new equipment, and this all has to be verified, validated for use, and that has been done with the SMVN too. We have had some lemons, and we've had quite a lot of downtime and equipment that we wouldn't necessarily have chosen for ourselves if we'd had time to choose, but it's here now, and we're getting on with it, and for the most part we've crossed quite a few of these boundaries. IT connectivity has been absolutely essential. These instruments, when they're putting out large numbers of samples, you don't want then to have to enter the results into our lab computer system, and then that goes out to SkyStore. When the instruments are connected, and eHealth has been crucial in this, the results go straight over, they just need to be checked and validated, and they go out the other side. So this has worked for the large machines. We're still having problems with the point of care instruments because they are mainly remote. We have security and firewall issues, so we're still working on that. Those results are still having to be taken off manually. Test performance, obviously, like all the tests, we're an accredited lab. We have to prove that the tests are usable and offer high quality. So this has still had to be done during this period of high throughput. And every time the tests change, and they change quite often depending on the strain that's circulating at the time. So you can imagine that the work in the background is quite invasive. Finally, transport. The transport system has been great, but obviously the vans only leave at certain times. We have depended so much in the past 2 years with the Blood Bikes charity, and I'd also like to recognise how important they have been for the whole of the region and for Argyll and Bute in getting samples to us and reagents to us when needed in a really quick way. So finally, so that you can see them, some of the team, we've got Mary and Chrisanne here, as I said today, but the rest of them are still working hard in the lab. Obviously, we've, like everybody else, have got some COVID absences at the moment, so we're still under stress there, but usually smiling behind the masks. So that's it from us. If you would like to ask questions, like I say, we've got Mary and Chrisanne here who can respond to some of your questions if you'd like to speak to them. Thank you. Hello, Catherine.
Sorry.
Oh.
Just to thank you for Susan for that fascinating presentation, and about an area of the operations of NHS that are largely unseen, but absolutely essential to the functioning of NHS throughout the country, as well as in NH Highland in particular. So go over to questions now, and Catherine, you had a question.
Thanks, Boyd. It's not so much a question, because obviously I've been very closely linked to the team that Susan heads up and leads, but it was just to say that this team has absolutely been central to their response through the pandemic. And, you know, without them working away behind the scenes, we would not have been able to deliver what we delivered for people across the Highlands. So I don't want that to be understated at all in terms of the recognition that this team really does deserve. And, you know, what I've observed is regular sort of reassessment of the position, finding solutions to challenges, particularly capacity challenges, and the ways that we needed to respond to testing huge volumes of people across the Highland area, and indeed our staff and our patients. So just a huge thanks from me, Susan, to you and the team, and very much appreciated. I don't have any questions though, Boyd, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. I think we're still on screen sharing too.
Oh, are we? Oh, so we are. Is that better?
That's better, yes. That's
okay.
better. Thank
good.
you, thanks. So, colleagues, questions for Susan and her colleagues. Graham.
Hi, thanks for that presentation. It was great. Can you tell us a wee bit about ongoing staffing and recruitment and so on, and what your challenges are for the months ahead? Thanks.
Our manager, David Ashburn, has done a review of staffing, and we have put in a few applications. We have quite a few support staff coming into the system, so that's ongoing. But what we're hoping is to get a homegrown talent through the system. We've got several people who are working in a support role at the moment who have accredited degrees, who we can hopefully move up and train them through the system. Chris-Anne has obviously been through the training programme. She's just about finished and coming out the other end. So it's people like her who will be coming up through, you know, the ranks. We are hoping that we will get some support for additional staff so that we can move away from our dependence on the 1 or 2 locums that we have, for example. But it might be interesting just to hear what Chris-Anne has to say about the whole training.
Yes, indeed. Chris-Anne.
Yeah, so training wise, of course, it's been an experience during COVID to just being thrown into it, but it's been really good because it's an opportunity that I wouldn't necessarily have had anywhere else. With Inverness in this lab, I was able to see all the equipment being brought into use, all the processes that we'd have to do to implement those new procedures. So it's really been a very stressful but really interesting time training wise, and I feel like it's helped me develop as a biomedical scientist having this experience.
Thanks, Chris-Anne. I have a Susan now.
Okay, obviously I'm not really on the coalface. I think it would be, oh sorry, it was Susan Ringwood. Apologies for stepping in there.
That's okay.
I was just wondering if Mary had something to say as section lead of molecular. I mean, how do you feel the staffing levels are for you to provide the extended day working and weekend working? Because that's not going to go away. I think that's what we need to recognise.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been very much a challenge throughout the pandemic to staff the section. Actually, I'd say that's the biggest challenge that I've felt. And our existing staff, as Susan said, have really stepped in and met the challenge head on. So I really appreciate that. But we always seem to be at a very low staffing level, and that is very difficult to then offer a quality service. So I really appreciate trainees such as Chris-Anne and some of the other trainees that we have, and the efforts that they've put in. They've been absolutely invaluable, and they've worked ever so hard in helping us offer the service that we do. And I really think that we have managed to offer this quality service despite our staffing issues. So yeah, that is the biggest challenge as far as I can see, above and beyond anything else.
Thank you, Mary. We might come back to that later. We don't often have two Susans on a call, but this time it's Susan from Mull.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. That was really interesting. There were two observations. One was about how many of the things that you've been almost forced to do because of the pandemic situation that you would carry forward into your business as usual. Have you learnt ways of doing things that you would like to be able to carry on? But the other question was about the IT difficulties that you're facing, and is there anything as a board that we could help support? That is about investment. Where's the blockage over the IT? Because that near patient testing has really got to work. Thank you.
It does have to work. There's quite a lot we'll take forward. Obviously, we were trying to get new equipment for quite a long time. So one of the benefits is we have equipment. It might not have been what we would have chosen, but we can work with it. We can apply it, use it for other systems. I feel over the pandemic, there's been a real reduction in looking for other infections. So that has been one of the big negatives. We're still carrying out these tests, but the numbers have obviously fallen. We're starting to see flu again. So now that we've got all of these things built up, hopefully this more rapid service, having these units in the regional labs, will help them, run their wards with being able to diagnose flu quickly, norovirus quickly, because a lot of these instruments can test for other agents, which is fantastic. As far as the IT is concerned, I'll pass you over to Mary just now, but the main issue, and this is a national issue, it's not just a Highland issue, is the need for security. And with these instruments, as well as being connected to the lab systems, they need to be connected to the outside world, to the provider of the instrument, so that they can troubleshoot if things go wrong. So it's usually to do with firewalls. Obviously, I think eHealth have, well, we know they've got staffing issues, and it would be quite nice to be a bit further ahead than we were. But to give them their due, they were so fast at getting the systems that they could into use and connected for us that, and we've had priority, so we do recognise that. But Mary, as far as the lab's concerned, can you see any connection improvements that could be made quickly or down the line?
As far as the lab is concerned, I think we're not too bad in terms of IT connectivity. I know we've had issues with our medium throughput instrument, the Nimbus, but that's just I think that instrument just doesn't work in our hands. We're a bit stumped as to why it doesn't. Neither the manufacturer or our IT staff can understand why it doesn't, but we have had constant issues with that particular instrument, which has sometimes really had an impact on our turnaround times. But we've come to the conclusion that that one isn't working for us, and we may have to bring in something else. But it is the point of care assays that do suffer from IT connectivity. We don't currently have them where our results can transfer over to our laboratory information system. So they have to be manually entered, and that obviously can sometimes result in possible transcription errors. So it would be good if eHealth could sort that one out for us. That would be really, really improving things for us.
Thank you both. I have Pam and then Alex.
Morning, and thanks to you all for your presentation. That was really helpful, and I think just to kind of again echo others' thanks and pay tribute to the work that you've done through this really difficult period, and how agile and flexible you've had to be in the wake of the demands made upon you. And I know when at one point I did ask if what we could do that would quickly support you in some of the really pressured moments you had. And it wasn't a quick fix. There weren't easy fixes to your situation, because you do need people with a certain level of skill to be able to come in and work alongside you. So I suppose on that kind of thinking, I think it would be really great to hear anything else that you think we do need to do as a board, particularly around that kind of helping you grow your own. What other support and advice could we do? Is there anything else we need to do around enhancing the trainee experience, or increasing the trainees that you can have access to? And also just a point to note that, you know, we are doing our strategy, so it can be very easy for us to focus on the services that we see visibly in our wards and in our community teams, and as already been stated, you're a service that we can't function without, but you're not seen in the same way as other services. So let's try and make sure that we articulate what the future services need to look like for your area as part of the enablers for us being able to modernise and go forward appropriately. So I would really encourage that kind of insight with Lorraine in developing the strategy. But I just wondered if there's anything else the board we need to do around increasing the number of trainees, or any other support you need from us that we could maybe enact from this discussion. Thank you.
Well, I'll start and then I'll hand over to Chris-Anne. But the problem with trainees is there's only a certain number that come out every year. And believe it or not, prior to COVID, there were too many. Not all of them wanted to come and work up here, but there were generally too many. With COVID, with the hubs opening, with the government labs at the Lighthouse, the demand on the numbers has been huge. So it's really hard. I think there'll be a fresh batch of graduates due out soon. And then they obviously, most of them have to go through a training portfolio, which Chris-Anne is just about to finish. So yes, I'll hand you over to Chris-Anne to hear if she's got anything that she thinks would work for us.
Hi. Training wise, I'm not quite sure there's anything. Of course, we need more trainees, but then we also need more people that are able to free themselves up from doing the work in the lab to train us, so we can be properly trained and be able to work independently to appropriately support the service. But I feel like the lab has been doing great with what we can do with the staffing levels that we have, in order to give the trainees the experience that they need in order for us to be able to work. And even being a part of the extended day rota and knowing what it is like to work in a shift pattern is adding to my experience as a biomedical scientist. And it's, as I said, it was really good being able to being thrown into the process. In other labs as a trainee, they would expect the more senior biomedical scientists to help with the validation of new equipment and stuff. But I'm really grateful that I was able to see that as a part of the process, be a part of that process and be included in that. But yeah, so I think my training experience has been really good with all the pressures that we've been going through, the amount of samples, because I was here before COVID started. So going from the small amount of samples we were doing before to 400 odd per day, I've really seen the way that the lab has had to implement new services, try to train new people. And I think we've been doing a really great job with what we've been provided. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris-Anne. Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just like to echo my thanks to all the work that the lab's done. I appreciate it. A lot of people just think you get the sample in, you shove it in a machine, the machine does the work. It doesn't. You do an awful lot of preparation. You've got the reagents to add, you've got the controls to run, you've got all the checks to do, as well as keep the machines going. In terms of, that was just mentioned, the fact that you were stepping up to 400. Physically, you had the people. What about the capacity in terms of the space? Because more equipment being shoved in and shoehorned into a laboratory that is fixed must have been an added problem. Is that something that we can do? Can we look to see if we can get you more space as well as more equipment leading on? I know Pam's looking at me going, God, he's spending money again. But how could we help in that case? And would more space be an added bonus for you? Thanks.
I should tell you, Susan, that Alex is the chair of finance, so
Oh, right. Thank you. Actually, I think Mary would be best placed to answer this. I have to say, you can hardly move in the lab for equipment. We've got hardly any bench space between the number of cabinets we've had to get in to process these higher risk samples and so on. So yeah, I'll hand you over to Mary.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a really relevant one. Yeah, it's been very difficult as we've had to increase our instrumentation massively to cope with the demands of COVID. The molecular laboratory has changed immensely. Every bench surface is now occupied by instruments, so we don't really have any other space to sit and write out worksheets or anything like that. It's very difficult to find an area to sit and do work. So yeah, if there is a way to increase our space, that would be really great. But I don't know if there's anywhere else that could be used, in the microbiology department, whether there's another room that we could occupy. It's already occupied by other sections and other uses. But yeah, if that can be looked at as a possibility, yeah, that would be marvelous.
Thank you, Mary. And I have Boyd Peters, and I think this will have to be the last contribution.
Thanks for giving me the last word, Boyd. So, hi, Boyd Peters, the Medical Director. So, I don't have a question as such, it's just a praise and an immense thank you. I think on behalf of I consider that the labs are a clinical service, although your hands-on patients will be a much less frequent thing. But the fact is irrefutable that it is the support, the background stuff that you do that allows that front-facing part of the NHS that the patients see, and where many of our clinical staff work. Without what you do, they can't do what they do, and the public wouldn't get what they get. And so it is a great opportunity today to really trumpet the immense efforts that you've had, especially in the last couple of years, where, as you've described today, you've really had to change what was already difficult and pressured, and the labs were already pretty crowded and busy, and you've had to really up that. And so I would just like to celebrate what you've done, and to give you an immense thank you on behalf of all the staff. Thank you.
Well, thank you once again for the chance to come and speak to you today. It's actually been really positive for us, even thinking about what this could bring for us. So yes, thanks for listening, and you know where we are. If you've any other questions, please feel free to get in touch and ask away. So we'll just leave you now to the rest of your meeting and get on with the testing in the lab. Thank you.
You will have realized the level of interest that your presentation has generated, the appreciation that people have shown of the wonderful work that you've done. It was a really absorbing presentation, Susan, and what you've done, the work you've carried out, is so essential, so vital to the functioning of the organization, and it's not celebrated enough. And we want you to know that we recognize what you're doing, and this has been very useful in getting a better understanding of it. You've had a number of offers of equipment, space, and I could add to that training as well. And it'd be good to hear from you about the training arrangements as they are present nationally, and what could be done to improve the flow of graduates through to NHS Highland from the providers that are in existence at present. So maybe after the meeting you could channel these bits of information through to Pam and colleagues.
I will do. Thank you.
But thank you, all three of you, immensely on behalf of the board.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And we move on now to the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of January. Just to go through them for accuracy, first of all. pages 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10. Just one small thing on page 10, Ruth, paragraph, first bullet point in item 18, first bullet point, meet the pared back governance currently in operation. Just a
Absolutely, yes, spotted that as you said it. Thank you.
And page 11. So can we take these to be an accurate record of the meeting? Yep, thumbs up. Okay. The action plan. I think there's a duplicate entry there, Ruth, and on item 10. The update on
Thank
the
you, Boyd. Yeah,
healing process.
yeah, we spotted that earlier, so we did make a change to it, but
Okay.
thank you for raising it. But yes, it was just a duplication.
Right. Any updates? Any further point?
Well, no, nothing other than what you can see there in front of you. There are a couple of items which have been attended to. So that's the board considered risk matters at its last development session on the 17th of March. And our arrangements for strategic risk management will be shared with the board as we move forward. And the review of the adjustments to the board's governance arrangements is brought back to you at this meeting. So there's still a couple of items which are sitting there, and they will be attended to at the next meeting and the board meeting in June. So if the board's content with the explanations, the action plan will be revised and updated accordingly.
Thank you, Ruth. Anything under matters arising? From the minutes? I don't see any hands up, so we can move on to Pam's report, Chief Executive report. Over to you, Pam.
Okay, thank you, Boyd. A few things to probably update you on and go over this morning. I suppose the first one that I think is obviously very important for us to acknowledge, and you'll hear more about when we do the IPQR, is clearly that the last couple of months have been really difficult across all our services, whether that be in the hospital, whether that be out in the community, health and social care, out in primary care across our contractors. So, and I'm sure our third sector partners, our independent partners have exactly the same experience. So an extremely pressured time, really more difficult than I think any time that we've experienced before because of the impact on staffing and the as a consequence of the Omicron variant. So whilst we have had significant admissions, the good news is that we haven't had significant admissions where people have been in the level of illness that they had in the earlier waves, but it's nevertheless we've had significant admissions, and that's been really difficult for frontline staff. I think the balance of risks that they've had to manage, the things that we haven't been able to do, such as our elective programme, as a result of the pressures within the system and the busyness and activity that's going through. And I think the other thing that must be incredibly difficult for staff as well is that there isn't any easy solutions to this position we're in. So we daily are looking at our staffing, looking at what else we can do, what we could do differently to try and ease the pressure. But the truth is there aren't very many easy solutions. It's been the same right across the country, and you'll have seen all the different messages and press releases to that effect in terms of pleas for people in our public and in our communities not to attend our emergency units unless they really seriously require urgent care, to use some of the other methods such as pharmacy first, our general practice access, and our 111 from NHS 24. So encouraging people to use these early entry areas so that they're diverted to the right place, and that we don't have people sitting in areas waiting for care for long periods because they're not prioritised in the way that they may be using another service. So really difficult time. We've worked hard to try and keep morale up, but I think it's safe to say that people have been going above and beyond what they've done before, and are extremely tired. So we have tried hard to look after the staff's welfare and to support them, but I'm sure for our frontline staff that might not always feel that it might not always feel like that's the case, because they are working under such significant pressure. We are hoping that will start to ease in the weeks to come, but of course there's an awful lot of unknowns, so we are monitoring that very, very rigorously. Within that, in social care, care at home and care homes have continued to be really challenged, again for the same reasons as the rest of the system: staffing levels, and the threat of COVID and the infection protection controls that are in place, and that has left some of our homes quite vulnerable. And you'll have noted that some of our homes have chosen to stop trading, and we are working very rigorously with those situations on a case-by-case basis, and so far managing to hold that space reasonably well. But we're also working very closely with Scottish Government colleagues and the Council in both Argyll and Bute and Highland to make sure that we do everything we can to sustain things. So difficult times, and I think we just need to do a big thank you again to all our staff, and a big thank you to our public who are having to tolerate the experiences that they are in terms of not getting elective procedures that they're waiting for, which is absolutely not where we want to be, and that we're making every effort to try and reconfigure and stabilise ourselves so that we can progress with that. The other part I wanted to pay tribute to was that I visited Argyll and Bute a week before last, and Susan Ringwood actually joined me at the Lornan Islands and did a walkabout there, and I think that was very much appreciated. I know a lot of us have been going out and about and really trying to be seen and trying to hear how it is for people at the front line, and I think that makes a massive difference. It was absolutely fantastic. Down to Campbellton, Lochgilp Head, into the Lornan Islands, and also looking at some of our land that is still sitting dormant, particularly in Lochgilp Head. I'd never been to Campbelltown before, so that was a new one for me. What a motivated team, and what a fantastic facility. But through it all, the key message was the challenges of recruitment and retention in our remote and rural areas. And I spent quite a bit of time with some of our medical leads in Lornan Islands, and again, really motivated, fantastic staff, but really looking for us to do everything we can to support them to get that sustainability in place. And I'm going to pick that remote and rural piece up further with some key individuals, because I do think we're going to have to maybe broaden our approach to that. So really successful visit, and I think Fiona Hogg was down last week as well. So we've been quite visible, also in some of the GP surgeries. We were at Tynebrook as well, which was excellent. So that was an interesting visit. I think the other aspect I wanted to just highlight was that we have just about this Thursday will have completed our latest engagement around our strategy, Together We Care, and Lorraine with her team has been working hard to try and secure that engagement. Obviously that is quite tricky at the moment because of the conditions we've been in terms of not really being able to offer the face-to-face experience that we'd hoped for. So that does have limitations in terms of how well engaged people have been able to be, and also just how busy our staff are. So we will continue to try and get as much out of that as possible, because it is really important that we get that strategy in place. The status quo is not sustainable. It's not where we want to be. We have to lift our heads above and look ahead. And again, that's a national discussion, but I think we have got some meat in the bones to move forward with that. And hopefully as we get into the summer, we'll be having that development session where I do hope we can come together and really look at where we've got to and how that strategy is shaping up. The other aspect, or the last aspect I want to talk about, is the maternity services, just to give you a further update on that. Since we last met, some of us executives met with the team and gave them the opportunity, not just in writing, but to verbalise their concerns about the options articulated within the Murray maternity report. We also had some good discussions about some of the relevant points that they had set out for us. The programme board is up and running and the work stream's been established, and there is a plan to move to a bit of a rapid planning process for Highland Maternity Services, and if the recommendation comes that we are still part of that solution for the wider north, then that will be incorporated within that process. That announcement hasn't happened yet. We think we will hear something this week, and we will have to work from there. I think it's very clear that there is an expectation for the north that we work collaboratively, as they do in the west and as they do in the east, on many things, and we are definitely signed up to that. But I think the same conditions prevail as we discussed the last time. For us to be successful in this, we need the right environment, and we need the right staffing levels, and we need the right pathways and governance to be in place for this to work well, and for everybody to feel safe in working within such a system. And we have articulated those points strongly to the Cabinet Secretary and his team, and alongside Grampian. We had the Cabinet Secretary here last week to meet with our team, which we were really welcomed. We asked that he would come and meet specifically with them. And so some of the team met with him in person and others sat in on Teams. Because of the tight timescale, it was difficult to do it any other way. But at least that happened. And he also did have a walk around the facility, so he has insight to the level of change that's required in the environment for Highland in its own right. And I think he acknowledged that well, that Highland requires investment around its maternity service, and it was, I suppose, supportive of the fact that that's the approach we're taking. So we will await the announcement to know where we stand, and we will take that forward in a planned way. But again, I just wanted to really emphasise to the board that we want our conditions to be satisfied so that our staff can do the best job that they want to do. I'm going to ask Boyd just to say a little bit about neonatal, and I'm going to ask Heidi to say a little bit about the kind of welfare aspects that we think are also extremely important to consider and for the board to be cited on. So I'll hand over to Boyd briefly and then Heidi.
Thanks. So I think improving the Highland service is the primary issue, and there's some outstanding recommendations about improving our neonatology, both facility and ideally the staffing. I think that links into what Chief Exec has mentioned, that we need to get to a better position overall for Highland. And that is the priority. So with that statement, to add to what has already been said, I'll pass over to Heidi May, the Nurse Director.
Hi, thanks everybody. So this is clearly a very important time for us, and looking to the welfare of the women who use our service and who may use the service in the future is really important. We've learned so much over the years about the welfare of the women that use our service. We're a remote and rural board. We have to put in many additional measures to support women who might be far away from their families, who might have their families with them here in terms of being cared for, and we need to make sure that we look after them. We need to make sure that women, for example, using neonatal services can access their babies quickly. For example, people need to breastfeed on a regular basis in Skaboo. And we need to have accommodation close to that service so that when a mum is needing to breastfeed in the middle of the night, they can get there quickly and easily. And right now we struggle with that service, and this is an opportunity for us to right those sort of situations. We also have situation in terms of our labour service and our labour suites. And we don't have ensuite facilities at the moment in our labour suite. And actually, this is an absolute opportunity for us to turn that around. So we need to be looking to the welfare needs of the women, as I say, in NHS Highland, and potentially in the future, given what the government might announce. But we are practiced as this as a board, and we do take that very seriously and give it a high priority.
So those are my main items, Boyd. I'm happy if there's any questions on any of those.
Thanks, Pam, and Heidi and Boyd as well. Questions, Anne?
Thanks, Boyd. I just wondered, Boyd, whether it would be appropriate today to reaffirm the position that we set out at the last meeting as described in the minutes with regard to the maternity services, in terms of, I suppose, our bottom lines about what we need to be able to move forward. I just wondered if that would be appropriate.
I don't think it would do any harm, Anne, to reiterate our position, even although I suspect the Cabinet Secretary has a better understanding, having visited our facilities in Regmore, of the needs, and indeed has recognised, has said so, that both sites, both Dr. Gray's and Regmore, require substantial investment. But I do think that our position is as it was at the last meeting. Pam, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I think that is important, because one of the anxieties, and it was the kind of estimated timescale that we'd put on implementing this change, which was an estimate, and I've emphasised that many times. More important is the conditions that need to be satisfied for us to deliver a safe and improved service, and also both the capital and revenue requirements in place to be able to realise that. That in itself doesn't completely solve our challenges, because recruitment and retention, as everybody knows, and the Cabinet Secretary knows, will be one of the determinants of how well we can do this. But whatever the outcome is, we have got all those issues that we need to address anyway. What I would hope, regardless of what comes out of Murray, is that what we bring back to you in hopefully June, July, will be a much clearer position of how Highland Maternity Services need to go forward, what the kind of imperatives are, what the both environmental and staffing configurations need to be. And again, as I said already, if the Murray component is requested to be part of that, then the same applies. But we absolutely, the conditions are probably the significant aspect to be satisfied, because the timescale will be dictated by our ability to deliver the conditions. That makes sense.
Anne, are you happy with that?
Yeah, no, that's fine, thanks.
Any other questions for Pam? I think you visited Cowell as well, Pam, and just wondered if there's an update on the situation regarding the GP practices in Dunoon.
George is actually present, might be better able to give an update on that, but my understanding is that continues to progress. There's quite, Cowell Hospital's actually got quite a lot of or potential for a change, because there's actually quite a lot of space in it that's not just quite working the way it should be. And it was kind of in the broader sense that I went round Cowell to look at where the different services might relocate to and how they might be enhanced. And Alan's there as well and walked round with me. So between George and Alan, that might be better if George first responds directly to the GP practice situation, and then Alan might want to say a little bit about the building.
Yeah, thank you. We've got the external consultants working with the GP practice, and at the moment the architects are working with them to design detailed drawings for the area of the hospital that are planned to move into. And associated with that, there's also discussions ongoing about where there'll be some realignment of staff and services within the hospital to vacate the space that they're going to be moving into. So the planning is well developed at this stage. I can't give a definite date when construction works will start, but hopefully that will be fairly soon.
And is that still one of the practices, George?
It's 2 practices that are moving into the hospitals. There's 3 practices in the town, and 2 of them have agreed to move into the hospital, and they're having discussions about merging to form a single larger practice which will be based in the hospital. Separately, we're having discussions with the 3rd practice who didn't wish to be involved in relocating to the hospital about their future premises and services requirements. So we're not excluding them from conversations. We're having separate conversations with them to make sure we have rounded solutions in place for the whole of the Dunoon population.
Yeah, thanks, George. Alan, did you want to add anything?
No, really, I think they've covered it. The works are ongoing, and hopefully we're just looking for a plan consent and building warrants to start the work. But as Pam says, the potential's there for Cowell Community Hospital, and what we're saying is this is the first phase of what would be 2 or 3 different phases of work to utilise the facility as best as we can. And as usual, it has its challenges, but I think there is potential, really good potential, and if we're committing investment for the GP area, I think it's about £2.5 million. The building's got to be there, you know, it has got a future, so it's what we utilise the rest of the building for. But I think it's a good opportunity for the health service itself, the Health and Social Care Partnership, to deliver, again, really good first-class services within that building.
Thanks, Alan. Alex?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Pam, just a thought about the care home situation. We know that there's a couple of care homes in the local area that are closing, etc. And there are rumours of more and more of the larger commercial suppliers, for want of a better one, thinking about moving out of Scotland. Have we started to look ahead to how we would be able to respond if we were in a position where some of those big commercial contractors pulled out and left us, I wouldn't say high and dry, but in a situation where we would have to become responsible for some of those care homes, or at least the residents of those care homes? Thanks.
Yeah, I suppose that's really what we're right in the middle of, and not just trying to work out with us locally, what does this mean nationally, because we're not the only, you know, everywhere has got this vulnerability. And I guess that's partly the part of the response to that is the National Care Service designing what the future is going to look like in terms of that provision. I think in the interim period, you know, we are really going to move into quite a robust piece of work around, you know, how does a locality look? What do we need to do to support a locality better? And what might the new models of care need to be that bring us a more sustainable future? And so I think if tomorrow, I think we're still in that position where if tomorrow a big provider were to pull out, that we would still have a significant challenge on our hands, and we would have to work through that systematically and pull in all the support that we could to try and resolve that. Our duty of care to the residents has to be first and foremost. We have that duty of care, and we would have to work through an alternative way to provide that. But we've been doing that quite systematically in the cases that we've experienced on a case-by-case basis, and I think that methodology allows you to be creative, allows you to also find bespoke solutions, because each locality is different. And I think that's probably the best way for us to go about that at the moment. And obviously we've got to align that to whatever the future brings. But I do think understanding our optimal ability at a community level to keep people close to home and at home is still the direction of travel we need to major on to assist in resolving this.
Okay. I don't see any more hands up just now, Pam. So thank you for your report, and we can move on to Tim's report on COVID, an update on COVID, and I think you've got a presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It has been circulated around, but only very recently, so I shall endeavour to share it. And I trust people can see that.
Yes.
The picture from COVID is slightly unusual and certainly different from what it's been over the course of what's now a 2-year pandemic. The number of cases remains extremely high, but we do have some scope for optimism. We've moved a couple of months ago from just relying on rates looking at PCR tests to including lateral flow tests. And what that means, it gives a bit of a better picture of COVID throughout the area. Although we do expect something up to even twice as much in terms of the positive numbers from those who are reporting tests and testing positive. The numbers that we've had up to 1,000 a day are absolutely huge and really, really high compared with earlier on in the pandemic. But the effects of the COVID are rather different. And most recently, as I'll show on a slide in a second, there has been evidence of a reduction in the number of cases. If you have a look on the Public Health Scotland website, at the areas coloured in because of the numbers of COVID cases, the whole of Scotland is one colour, and the whole of NHS Highland, bar a small part of Skye, is all the same colour, showing the highest level of COVID cases. But given the effect of vaccination, and also given the characteristics of the current Omicron variant and the particular type of Omicron, BA2, the effects on the population are different, and that's been reflected by national announcements in terms of changing to testing and changing to the regulations. We remain in a state where there is a very big impact on health and care settings. Just a minute ago in a question to Pam, care homes were raised, and the impact on care homes has been really huge over recent weeks, with the majority of care homes being closed to admissions because of COVID outbreaks. Similarly, we've had a really big impact within the health estate. Raigmore and other hospitals have seen a huge impact from COVID. It's not simply people coming in who are ill with COVID, but it's also people who come in for other reasons who also have COVID, although that's not the cause for admission. But we need to take the appropriate measures in order to prevent further spread of the virus. And in addition, there have been very big effects both in the health sector care homes, and also other parts of social care, notably care at home, with staff unable to work because they've got COVID or they're isolating because of COVID. There are changes coming up in the next few weeks, and the focus is moving away from looking at the entire population, given the effects of vaccination types of virus, to vulnerable settings and vulnerable people, and to have a concentration on prevention of illness in those people. And as we see the weeks go by, both with changes in the weather, more people being outdoors, and also what we are starting to see with the natural history of the virus, is that we should see a reduction in cases overall, although that doesn't mean that COVID's gone away, and we're likely to see some bumps along the road. If we look at where we are compared with other parts of Scotland, we can, and this is clearly by local authority level, earlier on in the pandemic, we were pretty near the bottom and had much lower levels. Now it's all mixed up, and there isn't really a particular logic to it, but there are clearly high levels all the way across Scotland, and we're certainly not overall doing particularly better than anybody else. That said, there are, as I mentioned, good signs. This shows the trends in rates for both local authority areas. Clearly, as you see on the right hand side of the chart, that we're at extremely high levels, and in Highland the rate went up almost around to 2,000, which is the highest it's ever been. We had the really big peak around Christmas and the New Year, but there is the sign of a reduction in cases, and we've seen that in the few days since this chart was done. So we need to be cautious about being optimistic, but I think there are certainly grounds for optimism in terms of the cases going down. Where do we see the cases? Mainly in the younger people rather than older. We're seeing a little bit of a rise in the rates in older people in over 85s, as you can see from this chart, which is concerning given their vulnerability and increased likelihood to suffer illness from COVID. But the much higher rates, and certainly very much higher numbers, are in younger people. In school age, people can get poorly with COVID, but it's very rare. So it's mainly in the older age groups that we're more concerned. But also you can see in working age adults, there are relatively high rates, particularly working age women, and that's reflected in the effects on our workforce, who have a disproportionately higher rate of COVID than the population as a whole. Moving on to vaccination, it's really a good news story. We had a difficult start to the booster programme, but after that we've had excellent coverage. There's further work needed around younger people getting first, second and booster doses for working age people and those younger than working age. But as well as that, we're moving into fourth doses, what's been called spring boosters. So they will be starting the next few weeks. Therefore, anybody over 75, care home residents, and those who have a particular clinical vulnerability. The immunity for those people is starting to wane. And so they're receiving their fourth dose 6 months after their third dose, and it's likely for a wider part of the population that there'll be another booster program later on in the year, around in autumn. There's also the start of the universal offer for 5 to 11-year-olds. That again will start in a few weeks' time. Letters will be out very soon, and that's in addition to 5 to 11-year-old vulnerable 5 to 11-year-olds who've already been offered vaccinations. I would add that for people who still haven't been vaccinated, we don't give up on people if people haven't been vaccinated, or if people have missed boosters. There are still opportunities to have that. And just to run through a couple of charts on vaccination. This one shows the third dose, so the original booster coverage, showing greater than 90% coverage on people over 55, and for the younger age groups, we're still seeing a rise, which is shown on this on the next slide. Uptake in younger people and across the country as a whole does tend to be a bit lower than older people, but we're still making reasonably good progress. I've just seen that it looks like the age groups have been missed off this this slide. So the top one, the palest colour, I think goes up to is sort of younger working age adults up to about age 44, and the next one I think is around 18-year-olds, and then the bottom one is younger than 18. So I'm sorry that those appear to have been left off. But they, the darker the colour, the younger the age group, and we're seeing certainly a rise in. And this is second doses of the vaccine to give good coverage. But just before finishing the presentation and moving to questions, I'd just like to pick up on some of the things that have been said earlier. I'd certainly like to pay tribute to all the staff who've been working really hard dealing with COVID. There's an enormous workload. I certainly would like to join the others who pay tribute to the microbiology staff and to the other laboratory staff who've done sterling work, making sure that we can manage COVID in the best possible way. We've had a whole lot of staff working on vaccinations right across NHS Highland, doing a whole range of different jobs, whether backroom staff or those who are delivering the vaccine, and everybody is exhausted. Everybody's worked enormously hard over the last 2 years. Some of the people who are working will be finishing work or changing to other roles, such as those engaged in contact tracing, as contact tracing winds down from the end of April. But certainly it's important to pay tribute to all the staff who've worked really hard, and also to our residents, the population of NHS Highland, who've done their bit to follow the rules and to look after themselves and others over the last 2 years. We haven't finished yet. We've still got a fair way to go with COVID, but I hope that we're seeing things certainly on the way to improvement.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Any questions? Graham.
Thanks, Tim. That was a really helpful overview. Tim, I noticed there seems to be more women recording, or rates are higher amongst women now across most age groups. And am I right in saying that's different from early stages, or is that just to do with a greater willingness to test and record?
I'm not sure of the I'm not sure of the reason. It's a phenomenon that's not restricted to NHS Highland. I mean, it's something that's been clear nationally. There are probably a few reasons. You could be right around the willingness to test and record. I suspect also that women are more likely to just from day-to-day life be at higher risk, sort of have more contact with younger people. We've had a lot of the circulating virus, and the highest rates have been among children. So I think women clearly definitely be more likely to have the more prolonged contact with children, maybe more social contact. There are probably a few reasons for that, but it is a national phenomenon, and I think the particular challenge for us is the way it affects our workforce, and both the NHS and healthcare workforce, but particularly the social care workforce, which is very predominantly women. And I think that it is reflected when we look at the different types of workforces that are affected differently, that we've got a bit of a different dynamic going on now from what we had a few weeks ago, when there were some other areas of the workforce like transport that were much more affected.
Joanne, followed by Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Tim, I had a few questions around the spring booster, as it's known. I wondered if you could give a bit more information about how people are going to be informed. Is it back to through local GPs, or is it a national campaign letter informing people that they'll be due it? And will it be provided at vaccine centres, or is it back to your local GP offices? And just in addition to that, I'd seen that as the business park at the retail park in Inverness shutting and their services moving into the hub within the East Gate. Can you maybe give a bit of clarification on that as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for those questions. The spring booster is a national campaign, so the great majority of our residents will be vaccinated in NHS Highland vaccination centres, and not GPs. There will be a small number on the islands who will retain GP vaccination. The process is the same as other boards, in that we get sent the data about who will be vaccinated. We validate that data, send it back centrally, and then letters go out centrally inviting people to appointments, and then it will be people can then rebook the appointment. So there will be a whole list of booked appointments. So that's an entirely well, I say entirely, it's bar some very small areas. It's an NHS Highland programme. And yes, the vaccination centre is moving from the old Forestry Commission building, and it's moving into the Eastgate Centre, into the place that is being vacated by the musculoskeletal service moving on. So we think that will give good access to people in a good environment to be able to have their vaccines. But clearly that's just an Inverness. We've got the widespread facilities out all the way across NHS Highland.
Okay, Alex.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Tim. In one of your one of the slides, you mentioned reinfection. Have you got data breaking down how much reinfection we've now got? Bearing in mind that I think when we had Delta, there wasn't very much. Obviously, Omicron is increased because it's more infectious. This variant 2, or whatever they call it, it seems to be even more infectious still. Is that something of a concern? Does that mean that our immunity is A, waning, but B, waning even faster because of the different variants, or is it something that that you aren't really overly concerned about?
Yeah, reinfection is increasing. We do have the figures on reinfection. If anybody specifically wants to see them, then just drop me an email and I can send people the figures on reinfection. It is going up a little bit. I think most of what you said, I think is I'd agree with, in that it is going up. There is waning immunity, but also I'm not overly concerned. I think in any lot of immunity, whether it's natural immunity from past infection or whether it's immunity from vaccination, it will wane. It doesn't wane very quickly, but that's why we're looking at the spring booster campaign, and the recommendation from the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation is 6 months after the previous booster, just for those at particular high levels of vulnerability. So for the population as a whole, yes, there will be a degree of waning immunity. We will see some more reinfection. It is a small proportion of overall infections. It's certainly single figures percentage, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but it is a small percentage of overall. We'd expect it to rise, but it's not of huge concern. And I think the principal concern at the moment is really to make sure that those who are vulnerable and vulnerable to more serious infection, that they get revaccinated. Those who are very vulnerable, that they get access to medication, and so that they can use that to stop them going into hospital. Clearly, reinfection is also an issue that could potentially affect workforce availability. And I mean, we don't want people to be ill anyway, and the Omicron can still, even if people aren't get seriously ill, it's a nasty thing to have that we try and stop people having. But overall, it's not something that I'm hugely concerned about. But we need to keep it under review.
Thank you, Tim. And Anne.
Hi, Tim. Just thinking about that spring booster programme and the population that's aimed at, will we have alternative arrangements, for example, the housebound or mobile clinics? Presumably we'll be going into care homes rather, we were talking about vaccination centres earlier on, but will there be alternative arrangements for some of that population given their vulnerability and age? Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. So we'll be going into care homes and visiting the housebound, because as you rightly say, though, they are vulnerable people, and there will be quite a big proportion of them who won't be able to come to clinics. So yes, so we definitely making sure that we get round and try and have a person-centred approach to vaccination.
Graham Hardy.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Tim, for that. I just wanted, Tim, long COVID. Obviously, I do meet a lot of people that have had COVID, and they are struggling physically after the illness, with a lot of excessive tiredness, fatigue, all these sort of things. And I was speaking to some people last night, and there's not been much research done on long COVID, I don't think. And is that moving forward in some way? Are people coming to their GPs? Are people coming to the hospitals with problems of long COVID? Thanks.
I'm very sorry, I lost connection just in the middle of your question, but I'll try and answer that. And if I've missed any important points, please let me know. We are seeing certainly evidence of long COVID. There is a group that is looking at need and designing services for long COVID, led by Linda Curry, who's in Oban. What we're seeing particularly, I suppose, is a bit of a lower number than we might expect. Some of the original estimates were looking at something around 10% of people getting long COVID. But actually, when we look at other parts of the UK and what proportion of people appear to be suffering from long COVID, it does seem to be a lot lower than that. I think COVID hasn't finished yet, so we'll get other people who will sadly be developing long COVID. I think I'd expect it to be fewer people developing long COVID because fewer people now will be becoming seriously ill. But I think all people are potentially vulnerable to that. So we are seeing people who are needing care from that, and the work's continuing to look at the best way to provide services. And I think that's something that we will need to return to in more detail in future when we've got better mapping of what services will be available.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Graham, and thank you, Tim. Thanks, Tim, for taking us through the update on the presentation, which we are asked just to note. We're a little bit late for our break, 11:02 just now. Can we resume at 11:15, please? You can have a discomfort break instead of a comfort break today.